How's Annie? On June 10th, 1991, a relatively niche television series ended on an absurd cliffhanger that left the world pondering over what could or could not be possible from the mind of David Lynch and Mark Frost. From many different perspectives, executive decisions killed off this program long before it could see its entire vision for all to witness why it is a prevalent program. However, people had one bit of entertainment value for this very niche program for all to clamor behind and basically find more renewed promise with. And that came in August of 1992, where David Lynch gave the world a very polarizing film that left many people wondering if it was too far, if it was too absurd, too cruel, or if it was just too bizarre for the common man to view. Welcome, my fellow Marauders, cinephiles, and pie lovers alike, back to Marauders Reviews, and this is going to be my full-blown take on Twin Peaks: Fire Walk With Me. Let us begin.
Get a swig. God damn. Alright, let's get back on it.
Nation. Everything foreign. Spitting nothing but facts. Fans screaming, I'm back. Legendary, I'm that. Cooking up a new batch. Guess who got a new glow? Patching in a new flow. Purifying that dope. My dog with me, Cool Joe.
I'll see you again in 25 years. Meanwhile.
Before we dive into anything and everything, allow me to state one thing and one thing only. The first 30 minutes of film, after you get through 2+ minutes of credit openings and whatnot, or if you have like just the DVD like I did that didn't have it for some reason, you kind of move on from there. I understand the importance of Teresa Banks and how she's tied into a mystery that we've lightly heard about in the series thanks to its introduction in season 1 of the show. However, having Chester Desmond and Sam Stanley, I got his first and last name matched together. It doesn't really sell it for myself as important when we have those characters I have zero attachment to, and ultimately don't add much. When you then have Dale Cooper just in the background not doing too much as well. Was it because of certain things? That's some behind the scenes stuff involving some negotiations and for filming time constraints for Kyle MacLachlan that really you need to see some interviews to understand why that was more limited than it deserved to be, but I digress. So, now let's get into things for the plot in and of itself, where I would love to show you guys a lot of the footage, and I would love to go into a very big deep dive. Unfortunately, I cannot because getting through a lot of the footage takes some edits to do, but also at the same time, it can and cannot lead into very triggering manners. So if you would love to see the footage, either watch the film yourself, it's available on a lot of different platforms, or there are certain YouTubers that have had the liberty of having the footage in their reviews if you want to see just those snippets here and there. I personally would rather you guys watch the film rather than go to a different creator altogether, but that's just my opinion. So now getting into the plot itself for Laura Palmer and the days leading into her death. We are just watching her live her life as best as we can as an outside observer. She goes to school. She's technically dating Bobby, who is a reflection of the abuse that she has in her private life and how it is very damning to her soul. She's dating James, a reflection of a future that she could have for the love, for the cherished emotions, for the overall empathetic nature that she is looking for that she never really had at home, and how she has a connection to a local gardener and local just nomadic isolationist by the name of Harold.
It's so hard.
Along those different fields, like with Bobby having a old drug ring thing that we kind of get more established in the series, James being just a very sensitive guy that wants to love Laura for herself, and about Laura working for Jacques as a teenage prostitute. Can't forget about that. We're focusing mostly on what led into her soul being where it is today. And mostly it comes from an odd connection to the Black Lodge that I don't think is ever truly explained in the film or in the original 2 seasons of the show. But it does kind of raise a lot of questions about the importance of Laura Palmer, the character, rather than Laura Palmer, the corpse, the victim, all of these things. It's way more important in those aspects because we don't really get real information about it in this film. We just get the inside look into her mind and hidden personality and the troubles that she is enduring. All the while, still covering what she thought she was supposed to do given her situations about being a victim of Bob. Bob, who was instrumental in the death of Teresa Banks, in how he executed those events, and then manufactured how he killed Laura Palmer. So with those things into consideration, we're watching just a victim go through their lives and how they end up being the inciting incident that brings together a whole cast of characters in a very dark and morose manner. The entirety of the film from start to finish when we get to Laura's narrative is very dark and very melancholic. I have never felt so sad and so, I guess, just empathetic for someone of this accord than I've ever felt for Laura Palmer, and I think that's in part due to Cheryl Lee. Cheryl Lee herself is a phenomenal part about why the plot works, and we will be getting more into that in the following segment of characters. But for now, if you guys really wanted to see some footage, I highly suggest you guys watch the film. Watch it for yourself to get your own opinions before coming back to this video, and maybe you'll probably find a better appreciation in certain regards for where we're sitting. Or not. Maybe you're just gonna watch the film and be like, I don't want to watch anything about Twin Peaks because the movie is too fucking weird. I should know. I was watching with a lot of people that never watched the show and... God damn it, David!
What's my motherfucking name? I don't know. They think I'm crazy.
When it comes to characters in Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, I'm of two minds. On the one hand, Twin Peaks, the town, in and of itself, is a character. You've grown attached to it if you've seen the original series, if you've watched all of the natives and all of the citizens do their overall bits that breed into a new life for their whole entire thing. However, in Fire Walk with Me, none of those characters, whether it's the Log Lady or Big Ed or Josie or Leo or Bobby, James, none of those people, even Donna Hayward's brand new actress because Lara Flynn Boyle didn't want to be bothered to be back in the fucking franchise for some stupid fucking reason about ego, end up having any real importance on the variable. So instead, we're just focusing on Chester Desmond, a detective that, although working for the FBI to be who he is as a field agent, is kind of a carbon copy of where we see Dale Cooper in certain aspects of season 1 of the show, with Sam Stanley kind of just being there as his emotional support sidekick in various different ways. So I can't even really talk about them because unless we find out more about them in future projects away from the Lynch estate to then bring more energy back to them, I don't really have a care mantra for them in the forefront of my mind. However, When we get into stuff like with Cheryl Lee's Laura Palmer and Ray Wise's Leland Palmer, then we have something. As I established in the plot segment, Cheryl Lee made something phenomenal with what she brought to the table as Laura Palmer. Something about that performance in and of itself made me see it as less of a paycheck to paycheck type of mentality, but more like Cheryl felt something unique about her attachment towards Laura overall. Something about that presence, that cadence that was given over in every which way. Seductive, mysterious, shy, broken, anguish throughout every single thing. Like an emotional expression wheel that never stopped being spectacular. It gives off something that very seldom few actors and actresses have been able to demonstrate in a performance. And that's caring about the role so much that it never really felt like a role to just be taken lightly. It felt like you were taking in a child that you wanted to raise and cultivate beyond your own expression, your own beliefs, to make it your own, to where even the directors, the writers, the producers have to stop and admire what you're doing. Which is in no shape or form a takeaway from how a lot of different people began to really look at Cheryl Lee as a prime example about how to take a tortured souled character, bring forth so much energy to life for them, and allow audience members to feel like they have been seen, they have been heard, and they have a safe space in making sure that that one character could always be something that they will feel an attachment to in the bottom of their hearts. That takes talent. That takes magic. Now about Leland Palmer is a very complex character with some nuance to it that I don't think I've ever seen in a television performance in any of the years I've been trying to do this, both on and off camera. Ray Wise has done something where he has taken this role of a nuclear family man that could have just gone on his regular day, having nothing to do with the supernatural, and just trying to push for his daughter to be something, anything in the world. Nothing really out of the ordinary. But the moment he goes from Leland, of course, into Bobland, as many people will call him, there is a subtle change in the little things that happens when he's going from Leland to Bobland that only Ray Wise was able to masterfully put together in a way that I felt was ingenious. It truly was. And from it, I was captivated at first in the series of how we built up to those things, especially when you have certain YouTubers like, "Can I solve the case of who killed Laura Palmer?" Don't worry, guy, maybe Andy is the one who did it. And we end up with other shit involving how Ray Wise masterfully played off both roles of the unpossessed and possessed Leland so masterfully that you almost feel like there's a different edge that only an actor like Ray could be presenting for an audience. But it also elevates things to where when both actors have to share in a very tumultuous scene that is unsettling to the systems, you will probably still take away that both characters are masterfully played to where you don't know if one or both are the victims from an outside force that has stripped away everything from both figures as a masterfully done performance. That in and of itself is phenomenal, and I wish we had more cases like this for the ultimate vision at play, but because of how this film was supposed to be part of a trilogy that David Lynch wanted to do, this is why I didn't give due diligence or real credit to Chester Desmond and Sam Stanley. They were supposed to have more of a screen light for themselves, which is fine, but I didn't really feel the need to have their screen line be what it is. I know everyone's just like, what is this new terminology they're using? What is screen line? I've never heard that before. It's a personal thing I've ever kind of used whenever I watch a film nowadays of the screen line goes into how a character's lifespan or timeline is tied to the silver screen, mashing silver screen and the timeline frame into screen line. Maybe I'm going to use it in other videos, or maybe I'm just going to use it for absurdist films like this. But regardless, that's why I'm not giving the due diligence to these probably very important characters. Because we're not going to get much from them when all we had was 30 minutes.
30, yes.
And that's pretty much all I have for them, and that's a real shitty thing. Maybe if this was well received in a better capacity, or if, you know, ABC didn't screw over David and Mark, maybe would have more to work on. But we do what we can. We do what we can.
Sometimes it really just.
The writing for Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me it's bizarre to talk about, honestly, because when I initially wrote the script for this, I was more floored on the absurdity from the first initial segment of the film, talking about things from Chester Desmond's investigation in Deer Meadows, Washington, the various characters that he met, to then go into how these were tied initially with denizens of the Black Lodge that would expand on the cosmology that David was trying to push forth. But then the more I tried to rewatch the film to make the script, I had to chuck that bitch into the flames and try to do this like how we're doing this today. Because when we get to Laura's story, the driving force that is where we are in the narrative for why Agent Cooper goes to Twin Peaks, why the people are investigating the murder, why does Bob come into play for it all, what was Laura hiding in that journal, what was the whole inciting incident that led to her death in the first place. Everything that follows behind it is masterfully told because of what David wanted to put on paper about how deeply this woman suffered. Even in small throwaway moments, like when Laura's talking to the log lady about how life is. And I wish I could show more footage, but because of ABC especially, I can't really show much, so I can only do small snippets here and there on the screen. But if I could, it would be something for every last person to watch unfold. It is by far one of the most interesting things I've had the pleasure of observing for myself, because I don't think I could ever have expected David Lynch to make a product this good. Talking about the overall trauma, abuse, and other dangers that follow young women like Laura Palmer the way that I have. And it gave me a brand new appreciation for him, not only as a director, but as a writer, for how visceral it goes into play. Especially when you have it where, as people know from the original series, Bob possessed a person really close to Laura Palmer. That person turned out to be her dad. And there is a certain scene in it that I felt very attached to, because as much as I don't like to talk about this openly, I am a victim of SA. I have a weird connection to this whole thing as a not kinsmanship, I felt that visceral nature more and more because I sadly could relate to so much of it. And it rattled my bones to simply watch this unfold, knowing that it was not just Leland Palmer being operated by a different person to do those things, but to have Bob basically traumatize two people into such villainous things, where the villainous part was him using Leland for two different acts, but the villainous thing was painting Laura as just this other entity to the townspeople of Twin Peaks. Nothing about it felt sanctuous. Nothing about it felt sacred. Nothing about it felt really good in any capacity. It felt just overly disgusting. And that did more for me to understand why Bob is such a disgusting character, more than anything I could have gotten from other villains I've had the displeasure of looking into. And that's saying something. I'm going to be very brief when it comes to the themes of this film. If you will, in my opinion, the themes that cover how abuse follows and deteriorates the soul and sometimes feels more like a prison of one's true character are one of the major things that I have taken away from this movie, wholeheartedly. Within the entire runtime, I felt nothing more than just very vivid, very visceral opinions on just how poorly treated Laura was in the entirety of the runtime for her story. She didn't ask to be any of the things that she put up for multiple people. She didn't try to be what many people have labeled her. She was a prisoner of a lot of things that made her into this distorted version of who she wanted to be, from elements that perpetuated making her the forever victim. Her choices to combat it are commendable, but she was still trapped in that cage where the only escape that she was given was in her death. To be in a realm that she had a strange connection to that led her to be more of an inciting prisoner without relent. Another theme I kind of grasped from this is that truth is never as clean cut as we would like to imagine. Truth tends to come in waves that we will never understand or ascertain properly, because what is truth cannot always be direct. Sometimes it is messy, sometimes it is blurred in lines of absurdity that borderlines on insanity. We tend to dive and twist into things that leave our minds boggled by what we assume is truth. And from all of this, we end up on some sort of wonky fields that leave all of us in a weird sense of how things work. Does that mean these themes cannot coexist in the same manner? Of course not. These themes matter on a grander scale than what we would rather give as a nugget of the truth in all those different facets. Each theme that can be uncovered from this film about what many people took from what Laura went through, what the detectives have as their own theming thanks to what they're doing with the FBI, and all the things tied into what Bob and the Black Lodge have been doing across the globe at this point. All of the stuff from Leland's themes about himself lacking the necessary energies to always combat it, but always being caught on the strings. There are a multitude of themes to take from an absurdist piece of media. And so it's not as if one viewpoint is wrong in how to dissect the themes, so long as you're able to ascertain the heart and soul. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about a David Lynch production, even with a co-writer at the helm. So, I don't know. I feel like if you all walk away with a different theme to take from it, I would love to hear it in the comments below. I really would. But if you don't and we just sitting at the same thing for theming, let's discuss. Let's actually pick apart the stuff that we agree or disagree on in a nice, calming fashion. Shall we? Overall, there are many things to discuss about this film, if not every other film I will be talking about, not just in this series, but in other series that I will be doing these reviews of, because Fire Walk With Me has a lot to unpack, a lot to discuss, but that's going to be reserved for a retrospective I have in the works for every IP I am covering, not only for Marauders Reviews, but in other programs that I am the director and producer for. Especially since a few of these reviews I'm going to be taking away the reins and putting them in someone else's hands where I just do stuff behind the scenes. But for this episode, as we're covering Fire Walk With Me, the film, just the film, not the other parts of the IP, it is both amazing and polarizing for the good and bad reasons many people across the board have deemed it since its inception. Is it slow to get to the overall plotting because of the Chester Desmond plotline for the first 30-ish minutes of the film? Arguably so. Not many people cared when it came to the Chester Desmond or even the Sam Stanley character's whole thing. I didn't even feel like he was worth mentioning. That's how much Sam Stanley felt like to me as an important person in the review. Nothing about that really served much of a point for many audience members because all it did was enforce that the Black Lodge likes to focus on the broken, the downtrodden, and those that society will rather destroy, vilify, and turn into the worst versions to then swallow into its void and create people like Bob. Whether or not that was the intent, I'm not entirely sure, but it still was the end result because of that. Along with the fact that many people thought that Laura's scenes were a little bit too much to sit through because of, well, a lot of people thinking the vivid descriptions of a certain moment were a bit egregious. Like, very egregious to the point of like, wow, was that necessary? Was that necessary, David? Just, wow. Whoo boy. But I believe that in and of itself is still why I don't think this film was made for the audience people thought it was for, but instead for the people that were truly invested by the surrealist and absurdity and sometimes just very brilliant moments that David Lynch himself creates as a director, and sometimes as a writer. Like, something magical can be said about just watching this film to dive into a lot of different elements for this film, and it helps to elevate the importance of the television series when you watch this after seeing the first 2 seasons, before the studio execs decided to ruin things with the mystery of what happened to Laura Palmer, who killed Laura Palmer, blah, 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 blah. All those things that would have been so much better fleshed out slowly and steadily instead of that stupid sawmill plotline that I will readdress in a re-review down the line. But something really, really speaks to my soul whenever I have to sit and watch this film where I can't really do much after. It's that impactful of a piece of cinematic history. And I hope that many people help to reevaluate this film more and more now that David Lynch has passed on. And wholeheartedly, I really think this film deserves a better rewatch from others to see the importance behind the character work, the world structure that was going into play, as well as the cosmology that was slowly developing from the vision that David had for this production as a whole. But respectful notes aside, what is my rating standpoint for Fire Walk with Me? If I make this the prequel that it deserves to be for the series, that rating is going to be slightly lowered because we don't have the full vision that David had of a trilogy of films that he wanted to make. Sad but true. But if I just put this as a character film that isn't trying to be a prequel but more of like an explanation thing as a bridge point between the TV series and then the revival as it's mostly viewed today, my rating in of itself is, I'll be honest, 11.2 out of 13 for characters, for pacing, for story elements going into play, and for overall just set locations that were chosen to the T on a proper scale for the intended scope for the director. But to contrast that from how people know my usual things, if it's an 11 or such and such, it's usually in the B plus to B minus range for the letter-based thing. But for the alphabetical part, this is actually going to be a C plus. It's not that it's terrible, it's just when you really incorporate stuff of the FBI agents that don't really matter as much to the story that's supposed to be told about Laura, that takes away from the overall vision, in my opinion, about exploring the girl that the entire series was focused around for the longest time. Not only that, but certain elements involving Laura's story, whether it was the stuff of being topless in a bar for some unknown reason, I guess, because for me it made no sense, and then how they did the lighting effects of the flashing bolts of lighting for the vivid sexual abuse scene. I'm not taking away the points for the abuse scene because, frankly, it was talked about in the series, so just seeing it wasn't the problem. The problem was the photosensitivity was not respected, and I felt like I had a seizure for about a couple of minutes, if not for almost 2 hours. So thanks, David. And other than that, just certain scenes just seem to really drag out the pacing and certain elements when it came to Laura's narrative and even about Leland's focus when we were talking about him with his helpful co-pilot that pushed him from the driver's seat to the passenger seat from time to time. That's why it's a C+. But if I were to go for the star rating, most assuredly, I would wholeheartedly give this feature, I'm going to say 4 out of 7 stars. That is honestly a weird thing across the board for me because many people know I truly do like to endorse things if I put it with an 11 or something higher like that. But having it be a C plus and 4 stars out of 7, I think that kind of showcases that the vision is there, and although the complaints other people have are valid, my own problems with the film come more from just, I guess, the aesthetics of it all, as well as just how they wanted to go about presenting the overall image. So, other than that, would I say this is a must-watch, must-buy, rental, or ignore? A new feature I'm adding to these reviews. Honestly, I'm going to say this is a must-rent before you buy. The film itself, very important for many people trying to go into psychological horror, psychological thrillers, and psychological suspense media. David Lynch is a great director to study for these features, but the thing I always emphasize for many aspiring filmmakers, you can watch certain people's films, but you don't have to own those films. So if you want to just check the stuff out, if you want to just see where it goes, that's fine. But you don't have to buy this if you're not enjoying it. I have a copy that I watch whenever I want to, but that's because I like the film. You don't have to, so it is a must rent before you buy. For alternate recommendations, I would probably say Perfect Blue is the best counterpoint for this, or Paprika. But other than that, I think the only other recommendations I could probably give to this whole point would maybe Melancholia. But Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me came out in 1992 to polarizing reviews and was a box office bomb. It was not reappraised until the 2010s, when Twin Peaks Return became a thing for Showtime, and we will be talking about Showtime's overall third season of Twin Peaks away from the regular networks it was on for the first 2 seasons in the 90s. But that's gonna come in a later season. Right now, we have to prepare ourselves for the next episode, which, might be a little bit magical. Who's to say?
Except in IV, tryna fuck with VI, end up in the ER, dropping like a BR, clapping shit then rewind.